It's interesting to me that two medias, though very much the same, can do things very, very differently. And while I thought I was going to like one more than the other, it actually ended up being the other way around. Hi guys, it's April, and I'm going to do this review the same way I do all of my other reviews. I'm going to have the non-spoiler section up front, followed by the spoiled filled dump afterwards, in case you don't want to spoil yourself. But by no means am I going to judge you if you decide to stay around for the whole time, because this is a judgment-free zone. So just recently I did a review over Jim Henson's Labyrinth Coronation, which is a comic book series that talks about Jareth's ascension to the throne, sort of, kind of. So I decided that I was also going to give Jim Henson's Return to the Labyrinth a go. Now this is a manga put out by Tokyopop. This takes place 13 years after Sarah's initial run of the Labyrinth. And instead of Sarah being the center of the story, in this case, it's Toby. For 13 years, Jareth and the Goblin have been keeping an eye out on Toby. They have been granting his wishes, whether or not he really wants those wishes to come to fruition. And now Toby finds himself in the Labyrinth, becoming the next heir. This is a 4-volume set. We've got Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3, and Volume 4. I absolutely adore the covers of all of these volumes. The illustrator for the cover is different than the illustrator for the inside. And I have to say that here because while I am in awe of cover artwork, they are just gorgeous on so many different levels, and they really speak to that manga style. The illustrations on the inside, I don't want to come off cruel, but they are not my favorite. They are very roughly done. Proportions don't seem to be a thing that had any kind of consistency as you were reading this. There are even some points in the story. Me, as a avid Labyrinth fan, there are certain things that I definitely know about the story. There are certain things that I definitely remember about the story. And some of those things were a little butchered within this series, and it made me a little sad. There were some characters that I don't like the direction that the story took it. Toby, while he was a crying babe in the movie, the way he grew up, I did not like Toby's character. And with the way the illustrations were done, there were points where it was hard to tell the difference between Jareth and Toby. And I know some of that was done intentionally, but it made reading the story very, very difficult, especially when there were certain scenes in which you were having confrontations between the two of them. You didn't know who was who. And it's not good. It's not a bad story by any means, but as an avid Labyrinth fan, as someone who has built up certain characters in their mind in certain ways, this story was not my happy place. It added some characters that were interesting, and it threw in some backstory that, while Jareth is a villain in the movie, he is a villain because that's what Sarah chose to make him. But in the continuation of this story, Jareth takes a spin that he feels like Jareth, but he doesn't feel like Jareth. And some of the actions to make this story go along, not a huge fan of. And I think that hindered my enjoyment. That and the art style pulled me out of this story. It has some interesting concepts of growing up and Toby's coming of age story, but it also was so wrapped up in so many other really bizarre things that it didn't flow quite like the movie did. You didn't connect with it quite like you did in the movie. There are several attempted comedic moments that were put in there kind of like the Jim Henson style, but they didn't land right. They just didn't. So this does open the Labyrinth lore. It does try to play with things and does introduce some new characters and has the potential to be fairly interesting. Overall, I didn't enjoy it. I had to push myself through it to get it done. It's not a bad story. It's not one I enjoyed. And I think the artwork needs some help. You can tell that it is done in an attempt to do the manga style, but there isn't enough practice or training there to make it feel nice. So this is the point in which I go into some spoiler stuff. If you haven't read this, if you want to go read it, go read it. I would love to start a conversation with you about it. Leave comments down below, but I'm going to start getting into some things because there are a few things I need to unpack. My biggest thing with the story is the introduction of the Water Witch, their romantic background, and the way Jareth, the Goblin King, interacted with her, suddenly split, caused this whole weird revenge storyline, and then Jareth, who has this very weird concept of love and what he wants in life, ends up splitting Sarah as well. Jareth makes some very unethical choices in this, and I get it. He's Fae. He doesn't necessarily run on human morals, but the way he made these choices doesn't make sense to me in a way, because he split Sarah ultimately because he was a little concerned about his power. He had always wanted to possess her. There were things going on. He loved her, and therefore all of this came to be. But the part that he got, the dreamer part that he received, was so docile and so innocent that he had her locked up in a room, and she ended up not remembering, even though this was for years. And the whole reason that Jareth ran after Sarah in the first place and gave her all of these offers in the first place is because of how strong her will was. He did not get that strong part. But because he pulled that part out of Sarah, the Sarah that was back in the real world lost that strength as well, which technically you can't just suddenly lose an aspect. You can split the aspects so that one of the halves has the aspect and the other doesn't have the aspect. But where did that will go? The will had to go to one side or the other. And because of the innocence of the dreamer, I feel like the Sarah that stayed would have been a little harder, would have been a little more aggressive than the school teacher that she was then painted as. I don't like that aspect of the story. There are several holes that I feel exist in that story. And Jareth's whole revenge but wanting to start over with Sarah it makes sense, but with the way that it ended up ending, it was like, what was the point of all this? There wasn't. She was split and not herself for 13 years, and then la-di-da-di-da, now she's a writer kind of deal. With like zero consequences. Also that we could teach Toby to be grown up, and so Jareth could get his power back. And Toby was not a likable character at all within this story. Sarah started out seeming very, very bratty in the movie, and then she makes all of these friends and she grows and she becomes this person that we all see ourselves in and the dreamer that we all like to be. Toby, for the most part, whined through everything, became king, terrible at life, whined through all of that, sort of kind of made friends but immediately dismissed them. And it was Sarah who then in turn turned around and picked up most of them. And then at the very end, he has this aha moment that's like, I can't do this, you're my friend, I give it all up, ta-da, kind of deal. Which, I mean, yes, he had some character growth, he had some push forward, but it It was so dumb. And then you had the introduction of the newer villain who ends up having her moment of revenge isn't worth it. I can wait because Sarah's mortal and Jareth isn't, and so I can take him when I want to after Sarah's gone kind of deal, which they didn't even end up together anyways. So point none. It was just a thing. So yeah, there were things. I kind of read this as if it was fan fiction, and I choose not to believe that this is canon. That is my take on all this. I've decided that this is not canon. I can accept Coronation as canon. You can do some playing there. This not so much. No. Just no. The answer's no. Tell me down below your thoughts on this series if you have read it. I don't know how many have. This has been around for, I think, 10 or so years. Maybe a little longer than that at this point. I think it started in 2009. Maybe. Let me find a copyright page. No, I lied. This started 2006. So this is about 15 years ago that this started, which you can tell because obviously you read this the wrong direction for this format. And that threw me off. Threw me off so much at some point. But Tokyo Pop did that. Anyways, I'm going to stop babbling. I hope you guys will start a conversation with me down below. And of course, if you want to see more videos like this, hit that subscribe button, get all of the notifications, do all of the things, and I heart your beautiful faces. Bye.